Hi folks, I want to do a follow-up on my last video about how I treated the tomato plants that were blue. As you can see, basically everything has now turned green. I have a little bit of resistance on some of them yet, but then last night what I did is I made a solution of Epsom salts with water and just put it in a sprinkling can and doused them, see if that extra shot would be enough. It took about almost a week for the blue to disappear and them to be fully green now. So that must have been what the problem was, that lack of certain chemicals in, whether it was the phosphorus or the potassium or the was it the magnesium I guess I'm thinking. Whatever the case, it seems to have worked. So just a tip for you if you want to go back to my previous video and see what I did, in case you ever run into this problem, and it seemed to work. Now I also want to talk to you about something I alluded to in the other video, my experiment this year with tomato plants. As you can see, I've got fencing in the middle of the garden. You think, what in the world is that all about? Well, I had an idea that I read about and subsequently saw in a couple YouTube videos last winter about a better way to deal with tomato plants. I've always had these issues with trying to put them in cages, and then you have to put a stake in the middle of the cage because when they grow up they get so heavy the cages flop over, or if there's a storm they flop over. I've even had some plants that were so heavy that that in a storm not only did the cage flop over, but it broke the stake off too and flopped over. So, and you never quite get the whole plant in the cage, and you still get some, in the ground and so on, and you can't just let the tomatoes grow on the ground because then you lose like 60% of your crop to rot and bugs and other stuff. And I've had years like that where I didn't get cages put on and just tried to make the best of it. So this idea was one that somebody had on a website that I saw, first of all, different ways to grow tomatoes, and one was trellising them. I'd never heard of that before. Apparently people have been doing it for some time. And basically all that they have done, which is what I've done here, is I've gotten these wire panels, these galvanized wire panels, and these I just got from Tractor Supply. They are called if you're getting them from Tractor Supply, they're called cattle panels. They're 50 inches high and 16 feet long. And you can also get an 8-foot long one as well. For whatever reason, Tractor Supply, those they call handy panels, not cattle panels. So, but this is one option. As you can see there with my pole beans, I had one section of rebar that you would put, a rebar panel that you'd put down before you pour concrete. I don't know if that was a leftover from a job here years ago, but I had it in the barn, so I used that. That's usable, but now that's not galvanized. You can see it's already started to rust, but it's a heavier duty metal. It'll be years till it rusts through. And then to anchor these panels so that they're good and snug, so that they can hold the weight of all these tomato plants, is I just use these T-posts. And these are the heavier duty T-posts. They do a lighter duty one, but these are the ones that are a bit heavier duty. And what I used here were 6-footers. And I drove them into the ground about 2 feet, so they're anchored very well. They have the little wings on near the bottom to keep them stable. I put the wings running this way so that it can't flop back and forth that way. That's where the pressure would be on with the weight of the tomato plants. And then, like I said, every 8 feet I put a stake, so that when I came to the end of the 16 I had a splice. And there were a few that were a little bit off, and I ended up needing an extra pole or two, but that was okay. They were the 16-foot cattle panels. Now they have a thinner one at Tractor Supply, a narrower one, a 34-incher, and that was too small because these tomatoes are probably going to grow up 5-6 feet tall, so I needed this height. These 16-footers were about $30 a piece. And these stakes, they're about $5-6 a piece. So it's an investment, but it's not a huge investment. And the truth of the matter is, once these are in, I'm hoping I never have to move them again. You know, you can reuse the same ground for tomatoes year after year if you keep fertilizing it and you don't run into disease. So there should be no reason for me to have to move. Now I can always alternate too, because that upper row of panels there is for pole beans. So if next year I put the pole beans down here and the tomatoes up there, so be it. You know, it's the same structure. What I also did is, if you look there, I brought them up off the ground about 6 inches or so. You could probably go a little higher, I don't know, I just didn't try any higher. And so what I've got here is a height of close to 5 feet, maybe a few inches short. So that should support the weight of the growing tomatoes. The advantage of doing this way, what I've been reading about, is number one, it gets the tomatoes off the ground, so you won't have the disease issue. Second of all, with them growing up into the lattice here, the air gets around them better, so you have better health of the plants, better foliage, better crop yields. At least this is the claim. So I don't know, it's an experiment I'm trying for the first time. We'll see if it works or not. There are different ways that you can attach them. I've seen people just use zip ties. I just had leftover electric fence wire laying around, so I just tied them on that way. You can see here too, you know, on the front side there where the knobs are on the poles. Just enough, three wires or so per panel or per stake, so that they can't move. And I also did this backwards, I'll admit that. Because I was running so late this year with the garden, I actually put the tomato plants in the ground before I had gotten the panels and the stakes. It was just one of those things, the way it worked out. I knew about where the tomatoes had to go using this system, so I didn't have to move any tomato plants, but the configuration is a little bit strange, I guess. The distance and so on, I knew about what I was going to be using, but in one instance, when I got to the end of the bean row there, I had about 2.5 feet of panel left over at the end of the row. And then here, to get the 12th plant in here, I actually went beyond 16 feet. Actually, the 11th and the 12th. They were suggesting put 10 per every 16 feet. So what I did is I cut using my bolt cutters, my small bolt cutters, just cut the ends off the the panel that was up there, and put this 2.5 feet of extra panel in here. But that, of course, led to a short distance with a stake. But so it's a little bit cobbled together, but it's going to work, and I can use this pattern again other years. I mean, I know I can put 12 plants in here now, so even though it's longer than 16 feet, so be it. But the better way to do it would have been, and it's too late in the year for you to do this with your garden now, but maybe for next year, next spring, put your panels and stakes up first, and then plant your plants to them. That way you don't have, and the other thing I had to be very careful of putting these panels up is that I didn't crush any plants, because I was doing it myself. I didn't have a helper, which would have been better. I had to keep them from flopping around so they didn't knock plants over and crush plants. So I bumped a couple of them. I hope they're going to be okay, but that way you don't have to worry about that if you do those first as well. So I will give you an update later in the summer as these tomatoes grow. As you can see, I even have some that already have some small tomatoes on them. Most of them haven't blossomed yet, but that's okay. I will give you an update as to how this system works. Now, according to what I read, the people who were doing this, and they might have had them actually a little closer together. I kept them as far apart as I did, so that I had some room in between to get to the panel in. They're suggesting that you can let the tomatoes grow until they get about 2 feet high, and when they do that, just take and tie the top, the main shaft near the top, over to the panel here with string to train them to grow up on it. Again, I'll see how that works when I get to doing it. I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. And you just got to keep watching, because sometimes these tomato plants will grow side shoots and things like that, and then you've got parts of the plant growing other places. You want them to all come up along the panel like this and weave in and out or grow in and out of the panel. That makes it self-supporting, and it also means it's secure. It's not going to flop. The plant won't flop over. It also should make picking tomatoes a whole lot easier because I'm not always having to bend down and reach through all kinds of foliage to get to wherever the tomatoes are. They're right here, you know, kind of bending a little bit maybe, but more almost eye level or just below eye level. Should make it a whole lot easier on the back, and hopefully this system will mean that they produce better and I have a whole lot less waste because of, you know, slugs and bugs and rabbits and everything else when they're down close to the ground. So we will see what happens, and I will let you know how it turns out. Now, like I said, I did the same thing over here with the pole beans, and these are just starting to come up too, as you can see. Got some grass growing in there I got to deal with, but they haven't started putting out their tendrils yet where they're going to reach out to the, but I'm assuming that they will probably be able to reach over to the wire mesh and then just grow on it from there. They should grow all the way up too, I would think. So this is also something I'm doing as an experiment this year because I didn't want to have to bend over to pick the bush beans all year. After 2 or 3 hours or whatever, if you're in a long patch of bending over like doing that, that's miserable. So we'll see how this goes. And also, I'll show you too, I forgot with the tomatoes, I do want to deal with the weed issue here. I always have weeds with the tomatoes, and I'm either always hoeing or tilling around them, and it's a pain. So what I'm also going to do this year is another idea that somebody gave me. I have a friend who gave me a whole big bag of old newspapers. So I'm going to put newspapers down around the tomato plants to try to choke out the weeds, the grass, etc. And then on top of the newspapers I'll put some old hay for mulch. And in that way the water can still get through, the rain can still get through, because the newspapers aren't, you know, waterproof, nor is the hay. And also it should help hold the moisture in the soil if it gets to be a drier summer, both the hay and the newspapers, which the tomato plants will love. So I'm going to do that. That's one of my next moves here in prep, is to get the newspapers and the hay down, and then we'll see how that turns out, because that's the first time I've tried that too. So a few experiments again this year. This is what gardening's all about. You try things, see what works, see what doesn't, give up on the things that don't work and try something different. But and different places in the country, different methods might work better than others. So at any rate, this is my plan, and I thank you for watching. I hope this helped. Like I said, there are many other YouTube videos out there of tomato trellising, perhaps some that even showed you how they did it. I mean, this seemed pretty simple to me. I didn't think showing you blow by blow was necessary because it's a very simple procedure. The most difficult thing in all of this was trying to get these 16-foot panels home from Tractor Supply. It was kind of an interesting experiment with a pickup truck with an 8-foot bed. So, but we got them here safely, and no animals were injured in the making of this film. So we're good to go. But thank you for watching, and please subscribe to our channel. Thank you for all of you who have joined recently, who have subscribed recently. Thank you for the amount of views we're now getting, and thank you for the fact that we've crossed the 500 subscriber threshold, and we're on our way to heading towards 600. So thank you so much for that too, as we live out in the country on a shoestring.